Today evening we have a special guest amongst us. We have Gareth Mills, who is an experienced and influential curriculum designer. He is passionate about design, believing that the way we choose to design our cities, our public services, and our schools has a deep impact on their effectiveness. In particular, Gareth is passionate about the way we design learning. As an advisor to the UK government when working for England's Curriculum Authority, Gareth led an initiative called the Futures Challenge. The initiative looked at how the curriculum might be developed to better respond to contemporary challenges faced by individuals, society, and the economy. Gareth now works with organizations and schools in the UK, Europe, and Asia, helping to design curricula and learning experiences for leaders, teachers, and students. His portfolio includes work with the International Baccalaureate Organization, UNESCO, and the National Foundation for Education Research. With that, it is my privilege to welcome Gareth Mills on the stage, please.
First of all, a massive, massive thank you for the invitation from the British Council to come and share tonight a personal perspective on what I think is one of the most important aspects of education. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think international education and the work that you've done and you're celebrating this evening is so significant. We're often at events like this, graduation events, celebrating exam results and things like this. Tonight is very special to me because we are celebrating international education. And as soon as we get running, I'm hopefully going to share about 10 slides so that we can have maybe 20 minutes, half an hour reflecting on the importance of international education. But I'm going to ask you, before I begin, to do me a favor. We're going to do a little experiment. I'm going to try and do some magic with you. So could you just stand up? Is that okay? It'll do you good. You've been sitting down a long time. You've been clapping. There's a film when I was a child. I don't know if you'll know the film, but it was a film called E.T., The Extraterrestrial. I think it was popular internationally, globally. But this creature, I don't know if you remember, had a finger, and on the end of it was a light. Now I want you to imagine that you've got a light or a laser pen on your finger. What I'm going to ask you to do is raise your finger, and you're going to look at the ceiling, and imagine that laser pen is shining onto the ceiling. Can you see the dot on the ceiling? Come on, can you see the dot on the ceiling? Good, imagine it. Now, this is hard. Imagine there's a clock on the ceiling. Okay? If you all just look this way a second, I'll demonstrate what's going to happen. We're going to try and move our finger, our laser pointer, in the same direction as the hands of the clock. We're going to move them in a clockwise direction. So I want you to try and do that. I'm not going to check. I'm trusting you're all going in a clockwise direction. Now imagine it. Can you see the hands going round, your pointer? Now what we're going to do. Are you sure, first of all, it's in a clockwise direction? Check. Yes. Okay, what we're going to do now is slowly, very slowly, keep going in the same direction. And I want you to bring your hand down, level with your eyes. Bring your hand down, level with your shoulder. And bring your hand down, level with your waist. Now I want you to tell me which way your finger's going. Is it clockwise or is it anti-clockwise? Look at your finger. What's happened? Let's just try that again all together, see if it works. Come on, do it again, clockwise. Make sure, you're all very clever people, clockwise, come on. And slowly bring it down. Check it's going in a clockwise direction. Down, down, by your waist. What happens? Right, you can think about what happens there in that magic. Okay, sit down now. I want to you to ponder why that might be the case, because it's significant in terms of what I'm going to say in the next few slides. And it's about perspectives and how we see the world. And I'm going to take you back to a time when I was a young boy, and my parents allowed me to stay up particularly late one evening. It was quite rare to stay up late, but it was a special day. And the day for me was, I believe, I'm going to check this, the date that I was allowed to stay up late was July the 20th, 1969. I don't know if anybody can guess what happened on that day, and the reason I was allowed to stay up late? Okay, it was the day that two people, the first two human beings ever, stood on the moon. And this was very exciting. We stayed up late and we watched a black and white TV, and there was the image of a guy called Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon. And the reason I want to share that is because there's only been 12 people who've done that, who stood on the moon, and looked back at planet Earth from a cold grey moon. And every single one of them comes back to Earth and says, my life's changed. I've got a different perspective. I've got a different perspective to what's going on planet Earth. I feel almost spiritual from the experience. So that really hooked me into interest in space and travel and things like this, the planets, and at school we did things like make rockets and study solar system and all the things I'm sure you do as well. But about 10 or 15 years later, a book came out, and it was a book called Pale Blue Dot by someone who worked for NASA, and he was part of an expedition that sent probes deep into space, far out into the solar system. And they went past all the planets, and just before it lost contact with Earth, he persuaded the people at NASA to say, turn the camera from the planets and turn it back to planet Earth. And if I showed you that picture on this screen now, it would be a complete black picture. Because somewhere, right in the distance, if you look really carefully and enlarge the picture, is this tiny pale blue dot that you saw from miles away, planet Earth. And he wrote a book called Pale Blue Dot, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of the things that he said in that. Can I have the slide? And I want you to do this for me. I want you to look at that pale blue dot. Don't look at me, look at the pale blue dot a minute. Think about perspectives. Anyway, that pale blue dot, that's here. That's where we are tonight. We're all of us on that pale blue dot. Every one of us, from India to the UK, from Australia to the Americans, China to Chile, every human being that's alive is on that blue dot. That's where we all are. On it too is everyone we know. Our brothers, our sisters, our sons and daughters, our mothers and fathers. Everyone that has shaped the way the planet has evolved. Every king, every pauper, every creator or every genius, every evil destroyer, every corrupt politician, every civil rights hero, every child in every class, in every school, in every country is living on that pale blue dot. And I think that's an awesome thought. That's where we are. And what's even more awesome for me is that it's not just the blue dot, it's a tiny, tiny thin layer that we live in, that we exist in. A tiny, tiny thin layer. All the sorrows, all the joys, everything we've ever thought has happened in that tiny layer on this pale blue dot. Anyway, since that 1969, we've sent probes out, we've explored the universe, we've used telescopes, and we've yet to find another place that is inhabited. We've yet to find life anywhere. The only life, the only thing that we know is happening in this tiny little layer. And to me, that's one of the thoughts that takes us into why this work about international education matters. This is where everything happened. It all happened here. Every war, every city, every ideology, every religion, everything has just happened in this thin layer. I'm going to show you another picture. Equally amazing. As well as looking out into space with technology, we've also looked into ourselves, and in particular, into the brain. And what's amazing about that is the brain functions with the laws of physics and chemistry, but a remarkable thing has happened with the brain. We've got consciousness. It thinks things, it does things, it creates, it feels. Everything that we feel on this little planet comes from our brain. Every invention, every tool, every painting, every poem, every weapon of war, every weapon of peace was designed by one of these. The human spirit, totally defined by two things, I think. One, it's absolute ingenuity. It's ingenuity. to shape the world, to shape this space. And it's desire to find things out. It's desire to explore. We've used our ingenuity to do all sorts of things, explored the planet, every part of the planet. We've also used, at times, one other very human thing, and that's our empathy, our emotion that gives us a sort of sense of ethics. And I mention this because we live at a time when I think we're at a tipping point. We're beginning to see it. You know, if you think about the population of Earth, it's suddenly gone on an exponential arc, more people. If we think about technology, as technology moves into the workplace, more and more jobs are done by robots, and we're losing our employment. Money moves around the world quickly, followed by people moving around and jobs moving around the world. You know, there's a real technical and economic challenge that young people are facing. There's an environmental challenge. You're very aware of that here in Delhi when you think about the air quality sometimes. You know, there are challenges that young people face that are big challenges, and they're significant challenges. And I think when we think about international education, we often have a focus around international education of things like the Sustainable Development Goals, things that matter. They're often called wicked problems. How do we prepare people to deal with this uncertainty and these wicked problems? Because the only place it's going to happen is in this thin blue layer on the dot, and in this thing, this brain that's full of ingenuity and empathy. I sometimes work in schools around the world, and this is a cover of a beautiful school brochure from Spain. I don't know if you can read it, anybody. I don't speak Spanish, but I know that it says, not go into school, go into the future. Not go into school, go into the future. And I loved that when I saw it. I think, what a profound thing. They're preparing kids for a future that we'll never see, maybe, that we'll never experience. And through the children we teach, we're touching the future and the challenges they face. So how do we prepare them for this uncertain world? How do we do that? In some of the workshops we've had today, we've been asking people, what do you need to be fit for the future? I'm not going to do it tonight, but we've done workshops on tables, and people say, what should you be like? Well, you should maybe be courageous. You should have stickability and try things out. You should have empathy with others. You should be a good team player. You should be imaginative. You should be literate. You should be numerate. You should be a great team player because you're going to have to collaborate. You need to be a critical thinker. And these are the things that the British Council are really promoting through their core skills program. And to me, it totally overlaps with my challenge about how do we prepare people for this future. So you can think about the positive attitudes. You can think about the skills people need. And of course, they need to be knowledgeable too. Knowledgeable about the world and the contemporary challenges we face. Now, that's a big ask for us as teachers. But the work that you've been doing today, I know, gets into this territory. You are thinking about developing their knowledge. But their skills and their attitudes and their character, that equally matters too, that we're educating the whole person. And it matters, and internationalism matters, because we share this tiny little planet. And if you think about global warming, it hasn't got a passport, it doesn't have to go past a border guard. The effects of global warming spreads over the planet. The effects of the effects of robotics spreads across the planet. The effects of economic changes go across the planet. So we need to collaborate to find these solutions. And there are three things that I think really matter. We have a local perspective, what's going on in our area. We have a national perspective, our nation, and we need a global perspective. So education's got to do those three things. I'm just going to share one little project I was involved in some time ago. You've got hundreds of these, and I'd love to see the pictures that you share for your projects. But here's a school in the UK thinking about living things, thinking about the conditions for growth, and they made a little garden and they planted seeds. But what was lovely about this little project is they shared it with a school in Japan, and they planted the same seeds. And they started talking together to thinking about what's the weather like for you? What's it like here? And they talked onto bigger issues from their little plants into thinking about the climate. And when the thing came to fruition and they harvested the plants, they thought about healthy eating and diets and things we could have. Unfortunately, there was almost an incident when this picture arrived from Japan. But it really provoked a massive discussion about the conditions for growth and what we need, and when it's too dry or it's too hot. So, really powerful stuff. And I think this is the inquiry, this is the ingenuity you've been showing to get your International School Award. Making bridges, building bridges, making links, thinking about important issues. And my last few slides are, I use this metaphor of an iceberg. And everybody knows, that 7/8 or whatever it is, 3/4 of the iceberg sits beneath the water. And I like it because sometimes when we talk about schools or education, we do become obsessed with one aspect of education. And it does matter. We do become obsessed with how well are we doing in our exams? How well are we doing compared to this school and that school? And we drive things forward by an important part of the curriculum, but only one part. Because to develop the whole person, international citizens, people who can change things, we need to think about what's underneath. And I'm going to leave you with, for me, 3 really important things that underpin all the work we do with international education. The first is international education gives people a sense of identity, a sense of belonging. To know I'm cared for, I'm valued, I'm known in my community, I've got a stake, I can be a good learner. And we have learning experiences that help our sense of identity because we share something of our own culture with others who've got a different culture. And that's a really good thing because it opens up our minds to different perspectives, different people feel different things, but it also opens our mind up to the things we share in common. And this is the value of international education, belonging, identity. And the second thing that's significant for me is the big idea of mutuality. We are in this together, folks. It doesn't matter where you are, we are in it together. And if we don't solve these wicked problems, these difficult problems, we will all actually thrive or worse together. And I like these themes. Our futures are interdependent. We share a common humanity, and what unites us is better, what is greater than what divides us. So we see these projects that you've been working on that may well have looked at local cultural issues or local geographical issues and compared them with other people. And this all helps that sense of mutuality. And the third thing is a sense of agency. Most of our projects involve not in just us learning, but actually doing something. Maybe bringing about some change, being a leader, trying to make something better, perhaps recycling a little bit more, or thinking about the choices we make. So working on big problems matters. So you've got this sense of belonging, this sense of mutuality, and this sense of agency. And to me, that's what's great about chatting to you tonight, because education, as Nelson Mandela said, is the most powerful tool we have to change the world. When we get it wrong, we get a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, and even worse, sometimes apathy and even alienation. But when we get it right, we leave people with things that really matter: optimism and hope, the propensity to act, to do things, generosity, aspirations, and the really important word, empowerment. These things matter. These are the things that sit underneath that iceberg. These are the things we want children to leave school having, as well as their results. So, ingenuity, this is my personal perspective. We have used it to explore and exploit the world. We've dug deep mines, we've taken things out, we've chopped down forests and trees, and we've been exploiting the world, often for very positive reasons. It's given us wonderful things, but we've reached this tipping point, and now we have to use our ingenuity and our empathy to actually explore, but find ways to sustain the world. And this is why the sustainability development goals that we've talked about and so linked with it matter so much. My final slide says, so this person is fit for the future. The biggest gift that I think we can give young people today is leaving school with the sense of, I believe I can make a difference. I can make a difference in my own life through my efforts and work. I can make a difference in my community. And if enough of us leave school feeling those things, we can make a difference in the world. I'd like you to think about that pale blue dot, to think about the wonderful work you've done, and I'd like to finish by saying, I don't want you to applaud me for what I've said. I'd love you to applaud yourselves for the wonderful projects you're doing to make young people fit for the future. Thank you very much.